No. Good morning, Kelly. We are in our live room. How are you this morning?
I'm very good. Thank you, Sorka. How are you doing?
Great. I'm good. I'm really good. I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to picking up some great tips myself, I have to say.
Good.
Um, we have a lot of people registered today. We've
Great.
84. There's 31 people in the room already. Let's see who we have. Hold on now, they're coming through. Jennifer, good morning. How are you? Good to see you. Hi, Bridie. James, great to see you. Shane, Breda, Mike, Geraldine, Linda, Claire, Geraldine. Oh, Geraldine, how are you? Great to see you on here. We had a chat when I was in the middle of Kerry last week. Elizabeth, Sean, Emer, Anne, Louise, Christine, Teresa, Elna, and we're going on page 2. Catherine, Donna, Matthias, Helen, Phoebe, Joe, Usha, Aidan, Julie, Marina, Michelle, Danielle, Darren, Aziz, Rosanna, Cleona, Seamus, and back to the start. There's not a chance that I'm going to remember all of those people, but welcome everybody. Absolutely delighted to have you here. We have 40 people in the room at the moment, so we'll just wait for maybe 2 minutes while everybody else gets a chance to come in. If I haven't read out your name, you're very welcome. I've just listed off a list of people there, and we won't remember everybody. We're delighted to welcome you all here this morning. I have some people popping into loads of people in the chat. Good morning, Claire, Helen, Elizabeth, Breda, Geraldine, Catherine, Anne. It's great to have everybody here this morning and see you're all making great use of the chat facility. So we're delighted to welcome you here on behalf of Taste for Success SkillNet and the bite-size upskilling workshops, which we're going to be running between now and the 18th of December. Every 3 weeks, we're going to be running 10 workshops, and we'll have 3 every week, and on the third week we'll have 4. So please keep an eye out for any workshops that we're running. And I know we're doing the first 3 days here with Kelly. So we're delighted to have you here, Kelly, for the next 3 days.
Thank you.
Doing tips and tricks for Excel, a taste of Excel, level 1, 2, and 3. However, Kelly, I know you told me before you don't have to be an expert in any particular area to join these because we're going to be going through them. And I'm just looking at a couple of more people coming in there. Good morning, everybody. What time? We've got 3 minutes past. Okay, Kelly, I think we'll kick off. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sorka Finucane, and I'm here hosting the Taste for Success SkillNet bite-size upskilling workshops. Today, we have the fantastic Kelly Megan with us from Knowledge Market, and we're going to be going through Excel level 1, top tips and tricks. Before we start, I'll let you know a little bit of housekeeping. We can't see you and we can't hear you, which a lot of people will be delighted to know. So please make use of the chat facility. You are here to pick Kelly's brain. So Kelly is going to be sharing her screen with us and taking us through different areas of Excel. If you have any questions, please pop them into the chat facility and I will ask questions on your behalf. We're going to let Kelly go through her full presentation and then we'll take questions at the end. But before we start, Kelly, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Delighted to have you here. Maybe tell us about what are you going to be taking us through today?
Well, what I'll do is I will start by sharing my screen. So I have that outline written there on the screen for you. And what you can see that we're going to be doing today is we're going to be dealing with level 1. Now, I am going to do this in the form of a training session. So we're going to be dealing with formulas and functions. They're the 2 different types of calculations in Excel. And I'm going to give you kind of the most important and the most basic functions that you can use and formulas. We're going to deal with a little bit of formatting. And again, I'm keeping it to the stuff that's actually important. And then we're going to put it all together and we're going to create a chart. And that'll kind of give you a real good, solid, basic look at Excel.
Fantastic. Kelly, I am going to leave you to it. I'm going to turn off my camera, so it's just going to
Okay,
be you, but I'll still be here in the background. And just before
perfect.
we go on, everybody, I hope you filled out your Taste of Success learner profiles. If you haven't, I'm popping the link into the chat right now, but please complete it later on. And we will leave it there. So Kelly, over to you. And if anybody has any very pressing questions, that's the only time I'll interject. Okay?
Perfect. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Liz.
Sorka. Okay, I'll start also by turning off my camera, so I'll be back to you later on. We'll put the concentration on the screen. So, guys, you are all very welcome here today. And what we are going to be looking at, as I mentioned, formulas, functions, formatting, etc. Now, just to let you know, I am a Microsoft Office training instructor. So this is what I do on a daily basis. And what we're going to be starting with today, we're going to start with this sheet called Serial. As you know, this is the proper way to start off your day. Now, this course today, or this bit of a training session that I'm going to do with you, this is geared towards those who have never used Excel before or have only used it in a very basic way, but it is particularly geared towards those who think Excel is not for me because I'm not good at maths. And the 3 sessions are actually going to be geared in that manner. So you do not need to be a maths expert to use Excel. Basic maths is all that you need, and we're going to debunk that today. So we're looking at this sheet, and as you can see, in our first column, we have products. In our second column, we have the number of pallets sold, and everything that you're seeing here is just typed in to the sheet. In the third column, we have the price per pallet. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to look at 2 different types of calculations using this information. Now, the 2 types of calculations that Excel has are formulas and functions. Now, we're going to start out dealing with formulas, and these are your really basic calculations. And if we look at just this first row here, so I'm just going to deal with this row for the moment. This would be where you would add one cell to another cell, or you would subtract one cell from another cell, or you would divide one cell by another cell, or multiply one cell by another cell. Now, what I want you to notice in what I've just said there is that I didn't say this is where you would calculate one figure by another figure. I said you'd calculate one cell by another cell. So this is where Excel is different to a calculator. We don't work with the figures, we work with the cells themselves. So we work with cell addresses. Now, I know you're saying, what in the name is a cell address? Well, a cell address or a cell name is the name of the cell itself. So for instance, this cell that I've clicked on here, this is cell B2. It takes its name first from the column that it's in and then from the row that it's in. And this is cell C2. And again, I'm going to work with this first row for demonstration purposes. Now, you don't have to sit here and try and work out the different rows. If you click onto a cell, what you'll have when you're in this mode, and we're currently in typing mode in Excel, what you have up above the A column on the left-hand side, you have something called the name box. And that box will always tell you the name of whatever cell you're in when you are contained in typing mode. Now I'm going to click onto this cell, and as you can see, it is cell D2. And actually, I'm seeing a really interesting thing happening over here. It's not reflecting the name, and that must have something to do with the webinar. It's a most unusual thing, but know that that doesn't happen all the time. This is actually cell D2. So we'll carry on while Excel has its little figari there. Now, when we calculate, I mentioned that we calculate using cell names or cell addresses. They both mean the same thing. Now, to do that, we have to come out of typing mode and we have to get into calculation mode. Now, to get into calculation mode, we use a sign, and that sign is the equal sign. So I've just typed that in. And what I want you to notice is that up on the ribbon, can you see that everything is kind of grayed out? And that's Excel shifting from typing mode into calculation mode. And it's now sitting there just waiting to calculate. So I'm going to get on with it because that's what it wants to do. So when I'm in calculation mode, if I click on something, and I'm going to click on B2, it's going to place that into the calculation for me. Now, I'm using this just to demonstrate, so I'm going to do an addition. I'm going to press the plus sign on my laptop, and then I'm going to click on to C2. And again, it places it into the calculation. And then when I've got that done, I want to accept it. Now, most people tend to press enter on the keyboard. I tend to use this little button up here. And again, for some reason, we're having a little bit of difficulty with it. That's normally the enter button. So it looks like I'm going to have to do this the keyboard way. The keyboard way of using this button, which is actually the enter button, is control and enter. Now, why have I used the control and enter? I use the control and enter because normally what it allows me to do is it allows me to see the calculation in the formula bar. And again, for some reason, this seems to be the actual webinar itself seems to be affecting Excel, and we're not seeing what's contained in the cell. So I'm just going to try moving off and moving back on. And unfortunately, no, it's not showing it to us. So just to let you know, what you would normally see in this formula bar is you would see it saying equals B2 plus C2. In other words, the calculation that is behind Excel. And that is really, really important. I know you can't see it, but it is actually really important in the way that it works. That there are two faces to Excel, and that this face here on the front end shows you the actual calculation itself, whereas the second face would normally show you the formula or the function, if we were using it, behind it. So at the moment, you're just going to have to take my word for it, and hopefully it might come to play later on. Okay, but that's how easy it is to do an addition. And that is really the level of math skills that you need to work with Excel. Now, I'm just going to delete that off. So I'm going to click delete on the keyboard, and I'm just very quickly going to go through doing a subtraction. Again, these are really basic calculations, and this is as tough as it gets at this level in Excel. So I'm going to say equals, and it's going to be C2, and I'm going to press the dash, which is the minus sign in Excel, and it's going to be minus B2. And again, I'm going to hold down control and press enter so that I stay on the cell itself and it accepts it. And again, you can see that the minus has taken place. So very, very easy to calculate. I'm going to try one more before I do the real calculation. So I'm just going to press delete on the keyboard, and I'm going to put in my equal sign, and I'm going to say I want to divide this cell, and the division sign is a /, and I want to divide it by this figure. And again, control and enter so that I stay on the cell. And you can see I get my answer, and I also get it breaking down into 5 decimal places. So they are 3 of the 4 formulas that I'm going to show you. Now, obviously, in real life, I'm not going to be doing any of those because they're not the correct formula. So I'm just going to delete them out. And what I'm going to show you now is I'm going to show you the correct formula, which is, of course, multiplication. So I'm putting in the equal sign, and it's going to be B2 multiplied by, and the multiplication sign is the asterisk. So for normal keyboard users, this is your shift key and 8 at the top of the keyboard. So it's B2 multiplied by C2. So again, at all stages, I am calculating the cell name, the cell address, also known as the cell reference. They all mean the same thing. So I'm going to accept that by pressing Control and Enter, and there's my answer. Now, I've mentioned that Excel is not the same as a calculator. When we use it like that, initially, it does seem very, very much like a calculator. But the difference with Excel is that Excel is extremely powerful, and the power comes not from doing one calculation, but from doing multiple calculations. And I've only got 11 more calculations to do, and I have absolutely no intention of doing them manually. So this is where the power of Excel comes in. I'm going to place my cursor onto that little node in the bottom right-hand corner of the calculated cell. When it goes onto that node, you can see I get a black crosshair. So I'll just take it off again. So it's that little node in the bottom right-hand corner. When my cursor goes onto that, I get a black crosshair. And that black crosshair is called a fill handle. And I'm going to click, hold down the click, and it allows me to copy the calculation to the other 11 cells. And when I release the click, voila, it's done. That is the power of Excel. And unfortunately, I can't show it to you in the formula bar, but what I want you to imagine, I've only done 12 calculations. And actually, I only calculated one. I used the fill handle to copy the calculations to the other cells. So what you have to imagine is, what if you had 20,000 calculations that you needed to do? Well, you still only do one, and you copy the calculation using the fill handle. So I'm going to explain how the fill handle works. And again, you're just going to need to take my word for it until you see it on your own sheet, because I can't physically show it to you in the formula bar. But when you copy a calculation from one cell to the other, and again, I've got my data laid out in columns, which is really important because that's how Excel likes to operate. It likes its data in columns. And when I copy down the reference to the next cell, it doesn't change the column references. So the B and the C part stay the same, but it does change the row reference. So if you were able to see this up here, it would say B3 multiplied by C3. And if you were able to see this one, it would say B4 multiplied by C4. Now, another way to show you this is to actually double click on a cell. So if I double click on this cell, you're able to see that original reference. I'm just going to Control Enter out of that. I'm going to double click onto the next cell, and you're going to see that B3 multiplied by C3. Now I'm going to escape out of that, and I'm going to do it again on the next one. So even though you can't see it written up here, this is allowing you to see the same thing, that what is changing is the row reference. And we call this type of calculation a relative calculation because it is copied to the cells relative to the row that you bring it to. So if I was to move down to this cell down here, I think you can guess what this one is going to say. So if I double click onto it, absolutely spot on. You got it right. It's B13 multiplied by C13. And again, I'm going to escape out of that. So as I say, I could have just as easily have done this for 20,000 calculations, but I actually only calculated once. Now I'm going to place my cursor under here, and what I want to do is I want to add this entire column up. Now what I don't want to do is to do this with a formula. And let me just show you. If I go equals this cell plus this cell plus this cell, I'm already bored and I might as well use a calculator. So I'm going to cancel out of this and I'm going to press escape. And remember, I'm only calculating 12 cells. So when we go beyond calculating more than one cell by another, we change over to functions. And the most common function of all is up here on the right hand side of the ribbon in the editing group, and it's called AutoSum. So this is the sum function, but they name it AutoSum to let you know it will automatically sum. And the way it works is if you place your cursor under a column of figures, it's programmed to grab all the figures straight up above the cell that you're contained on. It's programmed to stop if it hits a blank cell or if it hits a piece of text. And that's why we have text headings at the top of our columns in Excel. So let's take a look at it. I'm going to press the button, and straight away you can see that it's going to select the entire column for us. Absolutely fabulous. And if you take a look down here, now again, in a real life scenario, I would always suggest that you work up here in the formula bar. It's just not available to us at the moment. So there's always another way of dealing with these things. I'm going to concentrate down here. You can see that I pressed the AutoSum button and it put in the equals for me. So I didn't need to put the equals in. And remember, there's an equals in front of every single calculation in Excel because that's what puts it into calculation mode. It puts in the name of the function. So this function is the sum function. And then every single function has a set of open and closing brackets. And inside those brackets is the area to be calculated. And you can see that it's put in D2, then it has a colon, and the colon means 2, as in TO. And then it's got the last cell of the selection, D13. Now again, imagine if I had 20,000 cells to calculate. I put my cursor underneath, I press that button once, and it will say D2 to D20,000. It will do that calculation in the same amount of time. Excel is just the most super little program. So that's it. If I just go Control Enter, that's my calculation done. And look, our formula bar has come back to us. Hey, so we can carry on now, and hopefully it'll stick with us. So that is how simple it is to carry out a function. So functions are where we always want to be in Excel. Now, what I'm going to do next is show you the next most common function, and I'm going to put it here in the cell underneath. Now, the function that I'm going to show you is the average function. So it's the second most common function. But you'll remember that I told you these automatic functions, they are programmed to look straight up from the cell that you start on. They're programmed to grab every figure, and they're programmed to stop when they hit blank cells or when they hit text. Now, there are exceptions to that, but I'll come to that in a little while. So when I do this calculation now, it is going to go wrong. And it's really important that you see it going wrong. So I've placed my cursor here. I'm going back up towards the AutoSum, but I'm not clicking on that button this time. I'm clicking on the down arrow to the right of the AutoSum, and I'm going to swap over to the average function. And when I click onto it, you're going to see that it does exactly what it's programmed to do. And I'm going to put the concentration now back up into the formula bar because this is where I would normally work. And you can see that it's got equals average, and in the open and closing brackets, it's got D2 to D14. Now, we don't want to include D14 in this because it is a sum. And this is where you have to realize that Excel doesn't have a brain. It's just programmed to grab every figure that is directly above. And this is where you also realize that it's not my job to calculate any more than it's your job to calculate. It's Excel's job to calculate. But where our job comes in is it's our job to pick the correct function, which we've done, and then it's our job to make sure that the correct cells are involved in the calculation. And you can see they're not. So we have to correct it. Now, you can work down here at the cell. I prefer not to encourage people who are beginners to Excel to work down here because you're too close to the sheet and it's really easy for it to go horribly wrong. So I'm always encouraging people to work up here in the formula bar. And this should say D13. So I'm going to click right up there beside that 4. I'm going to backspace it out. Now you're going to see the change on the screen because it now says the average of D2 to D1, and you can see that selection on the screen. But I'm just going to type back in the 3. And I'm quite happy now that that is correct, and I can visually see that it's correct. So I'm going to press Control Enter. And there's our average of that column. So unless you are directly below a column, any calculation that you do, or most calculations that you do, are going to automatically go wrong. And that's the important part to realize, is that it's your job to fix the selection. Now, I just want to show you other kind of mistakes that can be made here. This is the average of D2 to D13. Sometimes when you click up into the formula bar, I don't know if this happens to you, but it definitely happens to me quite regularly, is I go to backspace out one thing, but I kind of double click and I accidentally take out two numbers instead. And when this happens to you for the first time, it can be you get a bit of a fright, because the numbers are completely gone and your cursor is sitting up against the letter, in this case, the letter D. What happens here is that Excel then tries to be incredibly helpful, and it says, oh, are you looking for a function that begins with the letter D? Because I have some here. And in fact, I've got other things that begin with the letter D. And you just have to say, no, thank you. I just want that to say number 13, and it will stop being helpful. Equally, if I backspace that right back and take out the letter D completely, it's no big deal. You just put back in the letter D yourself. Now, when you're putting back in the letter D, you don't have to capitalize it. Just type it in lowercase 13. I now have the correct selection, and I'm going to try my control enter again. And you'll notice that Excel capitalizes the D. So again, let Excel do as much of the work for you as possible. Now, all of that's lovely, but what about if I have to do my calculation, say over here on the side? So maybe I'm asked to put in the total into this cell. Now, I've told you that the AutoSum function, it's programmed to look up for figures. But it's also programmed that if it looks up and it can't find any figures, it's to turn left. So it's only programmed to look up or to look left. And that's why we work with our data in columns and in rows, because that's the way it's programmed. It is not programmed to look right, and it's not programmed to look down. Now, I also told you that it won't go through blank cells or text, and I said there are exceptions. And the exception is if it has to go through some text or some blanks to actually pick up a number in the first place. So watch what happens when I go to do the AutoSum. So it's going to go straight through the text, it's going to go straight through the blank, and it's going to stick to the row that it's on. And it's going to grab completely and utterly the wrong figures. Again, it doesn't have a brain. It's just doing what it's programmed to do. So we have to tell it, no, you're to calculate D2 to D13. And again, I can quite happily come up here. I can highlight that and I can type in D2 colon. Remember, the 2 is colon. To D13. I'm not capitalizing those D's. As long as I know what it is that I'm calculating, I can type it in. And when I'm up here working like that, it's generally because I'm working with a very, very large sheet. I'm just going to see if our little tick is now working. It doesn't look like it is, seeing as it's coming up with a different name, but let's give it a click and see what happens. And it is working. And the tooltip that comes up for this button should say enter. So something completely strange and alien came up there, but as long as you know the job that it does. So this is the mouse way of pressing enter and staying on the cell, or control and enter on the keyboard carries out the same action and keeps you on the cell. Now let's do average. So we'll do one more. I'm going to do the average function and I'm going to place the answer into this cell. So based on what I've told you, that when we use these automatic functions, they are programmed to look up, and if they can't find anything, they're programmed to look left. So I think you can guess what's going to happen when I go up to the down arrow of the AutoSum and I swap over to the average function. And you guessed it, it looks up. That's what it's programmed to do. Now, as you know, this is actually a very, very small sheet. So in real life, I wouldn't go up here and type. I generally do that for anything that is bigger than my current window. So the way I'm going to do this one is the way I would genuinely do such a small sheet. I would just click on D2 and drag down as far as D13. And you can see that it's popped it in there. I can double check it. Yep, it's absolutely fine. I'll go ahead and click on the tick to accept it. So that's both my formulas and my functions, and those are the most common, and they will get you so far in Excel. So what we're going to move on to next is we're going to move on to the formatting side of things. Now, there's lots of formatting we can do, but I'm going to try and stick to the ones that are really the most important to get you up and running. So I'm going to start with putting currency formatting onto our data. So I'm going to pick this set of cells here, and I'm going to use the currency. So that takes place in this little group called the number group. Now, at the moment, all of these cells are general, and that's the format of every cell that's on the sheet. But I want to put on currency, and this is the button that you use to put on your currency. Now, it's got a horrendously long name, accounting number format. We just call it the currency button. You click on it and it'll apply the currency of the area that you're in. So my laptop is set to Ireland, so I'm on euro. If my laptop was set to the USA, then I would get the dollar sign from that button. Now, it's known as the accounting number format, and you can see that's now reflected up here, whereas this cell or this cell is general or any of these. But it's reflected up there to tell you it's an accounting format. And what that means is that this button has been designed, yes, to put on currency, but it's put it on in the style that accountants like. In other words, they like it sitting to the left of the cell. Now, if you really prefer to have it sitting right up against the number, then there is a style called currency. And I'll just highlight this one, and I'll show you how to put that one on. And that's in the same group, but you go up to the down arrow here and you swap it over and you change it to currency. And you can see that the only difference is that it puts the sign right up against the figures themselves. Now, personally, I'm far too lazy to do that. I just go straight for this button and it pops it on. Now, what I really want you to notice is that when you have this on, you will not see it in the formula bar. Okay, this is put on at a level that's not understood by programming. And that's why I'm really making a point of mentioning this button. You never type in your euro sign, your dollar sign, or anything like that. You must use your signs according to the buttons here. And again, if I wanted that to be a dollar sign, I'd simply go to the down arrow and I would change it to the dollar sign. It is purely a sign. There is no type of conversion taking place. So I'm just going to pop it back to the euro. So that's our currency. And by the way, just to show you, if I want to take currency off, I can go any kind of formatting that I put on through this group can be taken off through here. But it's only formatting in this group that can be taken off through here and put back to general. So I'll pop that back on again. Now, I don't really want my decimal places. So I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to remove the decimal places off this because these are all zeros. And this is your increased decimal and this is your decreased decimal. And I click that and it's once, twice. Now, if you notice this one, it does have decimal places on it. You need to be careful about removing decimals off your figures. So this is okay because they're 0.0, but this is an actual figure. And I want you to watch what happens here. This is going to round up to 860 here. So when I remove that, pressing it once, twice, it rounds it. Now, personally, if I have decimals, I display them because that is not a calculated round. It is a visual round only. So I'm going to increase the decimals and keep the decimals on to that one. But again, I would probably remove them off the likes of this column. Now, other things that you might be interested in putting on would be things like color. So you can use buttons like this button here in the font group. This little bucket is your fill color, whereas this is your font color. So this will fill the background of the cell, but this will change the text. So if I wanted to, I can put on different colors onto each column. We seem to have lost our sheet there for some strange reason, so I'm going to see if I can undo that and bring it back. Guys, I am really sorry. The whole sheet seems to have suddenly died a death there. I'm going to try moving away and moving back. Nope, it's not bringing it to me either.
We can see your sheet here, Kelly.
Are you seeing me clicking on it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing absolutely nothing here. So are you seeing that being selected?
We can see all of the items on the left-hand side, all coloured in beige.
Okay, yeah, and the whole thing seems to have suddenly locked down. So what I'm going to do, if you can just bear with me a moment, I'm going to close the sheet down. I'm actually going to just, I'll close it down and then I'll reopen it again. So I'm just going to remove the share for a second, guys. I apologise for this, for whatever's taken place there.
While Kelly's doing that, I know I see, Aziz, your question there. Can we get a list of the functions learned in this webinar link, like sum, multiplication, etc.? No problem. We can get that for you later. Shane, is understanding Excel transferable to Google own version called Sheets? That's a good question. We'll put that down for Kelly when she comes back. Does anybody else have any questions that you'd like to ask Kelly at this point? Because I know I'm picking up some really good tips myself. I wasn't aware of those sum buttons, for example. Kelly, you're back there with the screen.
I am back with you. The color vanished for some strange reason. So
I'll put off my camera and I'll let you get back to it.
No problem. I sincerely apologize. The whole thing just froze and decided it didn't want to go any further. So I'll just very quickly go through that again. We have the ability to put on color and we can put different, and again, it's frozen. So it's something to do with the color. My apologies. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the formatting section for any further. I'm just going to unshare this and take it down. And then I'm going to go on to the next bit because it's something to do with that color. My screen has frozen again. So again, apologies, Sorka, if I could just hand over to you there while I take this back down again. Okay, I have that back up. It does not seem to be working. Let us take it down one more time. Again, I sincerely apologize, guys.
Chatting away to myself there. I was just saying to people that I found it very informative myself. I use Excel quite a lot, but again, self-taught. And I found the formatting buttons really useful, like the ones for the currency, because I usually right click and go to format cells and go the long way around doing things. Whereas the currency button was really interesting. So that will definitely save me some time. Okay. Yeah, you're back there now,
I think we're back. And I'm going to avoid those buttons because there's something, it just doesn't like the webinar software for some strange reason. But just know that this is your fill color and this is your font color. And I was going to go through as well, putting on your borders through here. But guys, I am going to leave that. So I'm going to move us on to the next bit. And the next bit is to create a chart from your data. And this is something that is, it's actually a really important one for most people, because most of us want to present our chart. You might want to present it onto PowerPoint, or you just might want to present it through Excel itself. So we're going to run through the creation of a chart. Now, to create a chart, the kind of things you need to think about: you need to have text at the top of your data. The text that's at the top of your data becomes the legend of your chart. And I'm going to create a column chart. It's the most commonly used and the most robust of the charts. So the area that you select needs to have text at the top, which we have. The area down the left needs also to be text, and that becomes the axis of your chart. Now, you could have dates, but what you shouldn't have are figures. Because again, if Excel sees figures, then it's going to want to put them into the columns. It needs to understand where the boundaries are. Then our other parts of the selection need to be figures, because they're the bits that we're going to be putting into the columns. Now, the two calculations that we created earlier, they should never be brought into a chart, because then you start charting on 200, 300%. So you're leaving them out. It's your base data. Now, I'm looking at all of this data. The chart that I'm going to create is going to show the product, and it's going to show the total sales. But I'm not just highlighting the two of those, and I'm doing that very, very deliberately, because I'm going to pretend that maybe as part of the presentation, I'm going to be showing to a different group straight afterwards, and I want to adjust to showing it from product and total sales to product and pallets sold. So I'm going to set this chart up so that it can be product and pallets sold, or products and price per pallet, or products and total sales. So I'm going to set it up so that I can filter it within the chart, that I don't have to keep making different charts. So I'm bringing all the information in, but the end goal is to display the A column and the D column. So now I'm going to go to my Insert tab, and on the Insert tab, roughly in the middle of the ribbon, this is where you're going to see the charts area. And this is where you're going to see the Insert column chart. Now, I always just go for the bog standard basic chart. Perfect. And your chart will be created. Now, it's not going to look great because the total sales is obviously going to dominate everything because it's such a large figure. You can barely see the price per pallet, and you can't see pallets sold at all because the figure is so low. But we're going to get rid of those, remember. Now, with the chart selected, notice that you have two contextual tabs up at the top. And also notice that you have these three little buttons here on the right. When I say that these things are contextual, if I click away from the chart, the tabs will vanish and the little buttons will vanish. So you need to be in the context of the chart, i.e. you need to have it selected, and then almost everything that we do is contained on these two tabs and within these three buttons. And this button is the one I'm really interested in. So I'm going to click onto that, because this allows me to filter out pallets sold and price per pallet, but yet it keeps them there so that I could use them at a later date, and I can apply that. So let's click onto that. Hopefully we haven't frozen again. Let's go back in and apply. That doesn't seem to want to do it. Okay, again, know that that's the way it's done. So what I'm going to do is, while that is having its little forgary, I am going to try and get rid of that. Nope, unfortunately something is really playing up with Excel here today, and it's just not letting me do anything. Let me try and take that down. Nope, I think we're frozen again, Sorka, I'm afraid.
No problem, Kelly. And those buttons weren't visible to us either, those three buttons.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's something going on with unfortunately, the webinar software and Excel are just fighting each other, and it looks like the webinar software is winning. So I don't know that I should attempt that again, because I just think it's going to be a matter of crashing out again. Yep, I'm going to end up crashing out again. So I think what we might have to do is we might have to just leave it at that, and sincerely apologize to everybody that I wasn't able to bring you the full amount of formatting or the charts, and that I was only able to bring you the calculations. But I'm really hoping that this hasn't turned you off. This is not Excel problem. So I don't want anyone to be turned off by that, but I'm hoping that just by looking at the calculations that we did, that you can see that you don't have to have, you don't have to be good at maths to do Excel. And that's the thing that I really, really wanted to get across from this webinar today. So Sorka, if it's okay with you, and we're actually, I know, at the end of the time anyway, but maybe we'll go into the Q&A side of things, and hopefully I don't crash out of that.
Amazing, Kelly. Yes, absolutely. So maybe if we'll pop back to if you stop sharing your screen, maybe, or
I'll take down.
Yeah. So I think that what you've shared with us has been really informative, and from the comments coming back from people on the chat, they're learning so much and they use Excel a lot. Fantastic sessions.
Good.
Our comments coming back. And maybe we can do, we can add a little navigation in at a later on and send it as a file to everybody to complement, I suppose, what was
Yes.
missing there. Anybody who lost sound at some stages, it won't be like that in the recording anyway. So this session is being recorded. So let me just run through some of the questions that had come in previously. I know one person had asked how long is the session going to be. It's going to be max an hour for today, tomorrow, and Thursday. And then Aziza said, can we get a list of functions learned in this webinar, like sum, multiplication, average, etc.?
Absolutely.
Sure. Shane has asked, is understanding Excel transferable to Google's own version of Sheets?
Now, I personally don't use Google, but I know many people who do, and yes, it is. Very, very much so. There'll be a few features that are not identical, but my understanding is that yes, it very, very much does.
Yeah. And then Sheena has asked a question, how many versions of Excel are there? Are you working using a newer version? Not sure if I remember seeing the decimalization rounding option before.
Yeah, I've been using Excel since version 2000. So there's 2000, 2003, 2007, 2010, 2013, 2016, stroke 365, and now 2019. So I've used all of those. And that button has been there in every single version. And honest to God, it's one of those things that they hide. They hide in plain sight, these buttons. I know when I first started teaching, and I was taught things in a very particular way. And years later, I discovered buttons that I just had, I was looking at them, but I just wasn't seeing them. And it changed the way then that I taught, because I discovered there's actually easier ways of doing it, because we tend to get taught the difficult ways of doing things, which I just don't understand. In other words, things like our calculations, we generally get taught to type them. Yeah. I don't teach people to type them. I only type if I absolutely have to. I have the mentality that it's my job to be as lazy as possible when I'm using Excel. I must make Excel do as much of the work as possible, not me. Yeah. So I do things in a different way. I found a completely different way of working, but these buttons were all there in front of me all the time. So I'm not surprised if you haven't seen the decimal buttons. Yeah. They have been there. It's just they're hiding in plain sight.
I love that approach. You want Excel to do everything as easily as possible, which is brilliant, because I'm an enter person. I always use the enter button, but I never saw that. I never knew what that tick was for. And I suppose I've never done really a course in Excel. It's that tough, but I think it's fascinating. Bernie, this is my first ever time working with Excel. Really enjoying it. Then the buttons were not obvious to those people when you were doing the charts. Maybe if we could try and do some sort of a recap, or what we could do is we could record a screen and then play it back as video tomorrow. maybe.
Yeah. We'll get that organized for you, because I know how frustrating it is when you don't get to see these things. So no, we'll get that sorted. That's not an issue, and that'll be sent out to everybody.
Let me see what else we've got coming in. Will we be able to learn how to extract balanced data panel in Excel in level 2?
I don't actually understand the question. My apologies.
Will we be able to learn how to extract balanced data panel? Aziz, maybe if you can give us more explanation on exactly what you need, that'd be brilliant. Donna said to use time available, a short recap would be helpful. Great presentation.
Thank you.
I suppose I don't think we have time for a recap. Kelly, I'll let you tell me that.
Well, I can give you a verbal recap on what we did. Absolutely, there's no problem. So what we looked at first is we looked at formulas. And remember, there's two types of calculations, formulas and functions. So formulas are your really basic calculations, your one cell plus another, one cell minus another, one cell divided by another, or one cell multiplied by another. That's what we call formulas, and they're really manual. You've got to go to the bother of typing in the equals, and you have to click on this, and really manual. So we don't use them very often, because we like to use functions, which are those automatic buttons. You press them and they do an awful lot of the work for you. So they put in the equals, they put in the name of the function, they put in the brackets, all that type of thing. So that's why we try and work, and we set up our sheets to work with functions wherever possible. So we did formulas first, then we did functions, and then we had a slightly aborted attempt on formatting, but we did get the currency in, and the currency is actually one of the most important ones. The reason for that is that a lot of people will type in the sign, and that's a real mistake to make in Excel. You must use the buttons that are provided, because they are understood by Excel's programming, and that they're held at kind of a lighter level in Excel. And they're understood by the programming, so they don't interfere with it. Whereas if you type in things like the euro sign shouldn't generally be a problem, but if you were to type in the dollar sign or the UK pound sign, it actually converts the number to a piece of text and stops it from calculating. So these are the important things to know. So I'm glad we got that one done of all of them, because that's actually the most important.
Yeah, amazing. Sheena Seamus has asked, would it be possible to have the sheet before the webinar so that they can work along with you? That's not
I have no problem with that whatsoever. Yeah. Yes, no problem. And I can send that on.
Yeah, some people,
and you can work along with it after the webinar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. As a basic user, this has been really helpful. Great, very clear training. Thank you. I do have to agree with that. I think your delivery is fantastic, Kelly. And
thank you very much.
No, seriously, how you communicate the different functions and everything. Just looking through the chat. I'm just reading. There's lots of great session. Thank you. Is pivot table included in the webinar? Ursula, we're doing pivot tables on Thursday.
Pivot tables is on the Thursday, and it's pivot tables for beginners.
Great.
So again, it's so many people are being asked. Pivot tables are considered to be an advanced feature, and yes, you can take them to a very, very advanced level. But what I see nowadays is people who've never even used Excel are expected to know how to use pivot tables, and for that to work, it's all about the structure of the data. And I cannot say this enough in Excel. It's the structure of your sheet that actually matters. It's not how large the data is. It's not how amazing the functions are. It's literally the structure. And if the structure is wrong, it doesn't matter how good you are with anything, you're going to make life really, really difficult for yourself. So we're going to look at this from the point of view of someone coming to pivot tables completely new, even a beginner. Okay. So that's Thursday's one. Super. Hopefully nothing goes awry on that one.
Okay. James has asked, do you cover other packages like Office 365? James, Kelly is coming back in, I think, 3 weeks' time, and she will be covering Microsoft PowerPoint. And then another 3 weeks after that, she's going to be doing Microsoft Word, another 3 days on each. So everybody keep an eye out for those. Aziz, how to fill blank cells with a number in Excel in level. How to fill blank cells. Okay, I'm not sure exactly what that means. Maybe if you can clarify that one. Is there keyboard shortcuts? I remember seeing a shortcut to hide a screen, but can't remember what that is.
Oh, hide a screen. I can't remember what that one now is off the top of my head either, but there are hundreds of keyboard shortcuts. Everyone has their favorites, the ones that they would use very, very regularly. I rarely hide anything. So it's by just as a side thing, be very careful about hiding. It causes huge problems in companies. It's something, when I go into companies to train, I am being pulled aside all the time and being asked by managers, etc., to tell people to stop hiding data. You can hide sheets, but you can hide columns and rows, and sometimes people hide them and then forget to unhide them. And from that point forward, everything then that you do is wrong. It really ruins the data. So hiding isn't one of my keyboard shortcuts, because I very rarely use it. But I do, on the courses that I give, I do go through keyboard shortcuts. And with the books that I would give to people, I would have a list of keyboard shortcuts at the back that I think are good for people just to get up and running with.
They're so handy.
Totally.
Great session, Kelly. Looking forward to tomorrow. Very well explained.
Thank you.
John says, I'd like to compliment Kelly on her very clear way of describing things. Thank you. There you go.
Thank you.
James has agreed with John, a real novice, and found the session great. Martina says, I find that when I print the grid lines, all the grid lines don't print. Maybe only every second line prints. What do you suggest?
I'm presuming that you're putting borders on to your data, that you're not using the grid line feature. So it's, if you want printing of the lines, it is the borders feature that you need to use. If it is borders you're using and you're having a problem, I would suggest you need to speak to IT. It might need to be a reinstallation, because that sounds like there could be something actually wrong with the program itself.
Okay. And more people agreeing that it's great to share the sheet in advance. Sorry, I'm just reading through all of these at the moment. Really good quick reference to Excel. Really good to understand the principles behind Excel. Adding up to the left only, print versus formula, using correct keys, e.g. tick key, control enter, thank you. Can we see the session recorded? Elena, the session was recorded and it'll be automatically sent to you in about 4 hours time. So you should get that. If you don't get that, pop me an email and I'll send you the link. Again, thanks very much. Very helpful. Session is recorded again. How do we register for tomorrow? I will pop a link into the chat right now for tomorrow's session. Let me just get it here for you.
And just to let you know, tomorrow's session, what I plan to cover is I'm going to look at the fabulous if function. Super function. And then what I want to do is I want to put it together with the sum and the average that we did today, so that it melds it all together. So you've got if, and then you've got sum if and average if. I was also going to be looking at conditional formatting. I'm getting scared of that now in case the formatting kills it again. So I might leave that towards the end. And I have another feature that I wanted to show, and it's kind of apropos of nothing. It doesn't really connect into anything that I've been doing, and it's just called Flash Fill. And I just love it, and I think everybody should know this particular feature. So that's kind of the layout for tomorrow, but the concentration very much on the functions if melded together with our sum and our average of today.
Fantastic. I think that you have, I know even with the glitches there, I think that everybody has learned something on the session today.
Great.
We will cover off what we haven't, what we missed. and we're all really looking forward to tomorrow, Kelly. And we
Excellent.
are 10:59, so we're just right on time. Again, everybody, you'll receive
Perfect.
the links. If you don't receive the links, let me know, or if you need to register for tomorrow, let me know, and we can get that sorted for you. Kelly, thank you so much for your time. It was great to have
Thank
you.
you.
I'm really looking forward to tomorrow.
Thank you very much, and to thank everybody for their patience of sticking with us there. We really appreciate it.
And I say thanks on behalf of Taste for Success Skillnet, and see you all tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.